Hi everyone, and welcome to the very last videocast for our unit, right? Social Psych. And the very last videocast that you ever have to watch for AP Psychology, okay? So, today we're going to focus on social relationships. So in the past, the videos we've talked about social thinking, and then video 2 is about social influence, and so video 3 is going to be about social relationships and how we get along with each other, right? So we're going to talk about peace, love, and war. So, conflict, right? What is conflict? Conflict is when two people have some sort of perceived incompatibility. Either it could be in the goal, they want different goals, they want to do different actions, they have different ideas, right? And situations that bring about or influence conflict are sometimes called a social trap, which is where the person has to choose between their individual interest or the group's interest, and distorted perceptions, which is when we form these diabolical or evil images of our enemy, and then our enemy in turn also forms those against us, and then it just goes back and forth. Okay, aggression, right? Obviously, conflict often leads to aggression, and aggression, it has to be something is only considered aggressive when it is intended to hurt or destroy something, okay? And if you think about what causes someone to be aggressive, there's a couple of different things, right? It's biological, it's psychological, and it's environmental, right? All those can play into an aggressive act. So in the biological sphere, right, genetics, they found that identical twins were more likely to say that they felt overly aggressive than fraternal twins. In the amygdala and frontal lobe, they actually found that in some of the death row inmates, they did a study of 15 death row inmates, and all of them had actually had severe brain trauma that could have caused inability or increased ability of their amygdala and frontal lobe. And when they place little electrodes in those parts of the brain, either in people or animals, you can make them have very aggressive reactions immediately. The level of testosterone, biologically, so some males have more testosterone than others, and the level of testosterone can lead to aggression, and alcohol also does the same thing, because it works with the chemicals inside your body, okay? The psychological factors, or the way that you think about and kind of deal with things, are, the first one is frustration aggression principle, and this is very, very kind of simple. It's the idea that when you can't do something, when you're blocked from accomplishing the goal, that frustration can make you angry, which makes you aggressive, okay? Rejection-induced aggression. This can be like isolation. So if people reject you, they won't let you be part of their group, right? That can lead to aggression because feeling, feeling a part of a group or accepted is a huge human need. Aggressive role models. So if we see our fathers being aggressive, or if we see on TV being aggressive, that can really lead to us in turn thinking that behavior is okay, right? That's the Bobo doll. And then rewards for aggression. So, if the behavior is rewarded, obviously you're going to continue it in the future. Sociocultural factors are, they found things like heat and crowding can really bring on aggression. If the room is warmer, people are more likely to act aggressive. There's the honor code, and, there's all these, codes with, well, how are you supposed to do, and how can you treat someone, and if someone does this to you, then you got to do that to them. And if they hurt your family, then you got to hurt their family, that kind of thing. Absent fathers can actually increase aggression. Being rejected from the group, like I said, rejection-induced aggression. Exposure to violent media, huge deal, right? Because the more violent media you see, the more likely you are to repeat that behavior. And they actually found that if they had, people watch violent, more sexually violent films for 6 weeks, and then non-sexually violent films for 6 weeks, those who watched them for 6 weeks were more likely to give a guy who was sentenced or who was charged with rape a lesser sentence than the other people who hadn't watched that. So something about the exposure increases your tolerance. And then de-individuation, so we talked about this. When you're immune, when you're basically hidden because you're in the crowd, you lose that individuality and you become very aggressive because you don't feel like people can really know it's you. Okay, prejudice and discrimination, right? Prejudice is a negative attitude, right? And of course, attitude is 3 parts. The thought, which is the belief, it's a stereotype. The feelings, which are usually anger or fear with prejudice. And then the actions, which is discrimination. It's very important that you know, right, that discrimination is the action, okay? It's caused prejudice is caused by different social, emotional, and cognitive factors, but discrimination in itself is actually the action of prejudice, okay? They're not the same thing. So what are some things that cause prejudice? The first one is economic inequality. So you have the haves and the have-nots. And what happens is those who are in power learn to justify their actions by blaming the victim. So slave owners would have blamed slaves. They would have said, well, they're lazy, ignorant, and irresponsible, and that's why they're slaves, right? Discrimination can breed anger or self-blame, causing further issues. So discrimination in societies is what ultimately led to the Hutus and the Tutsis and the Rwandan genocide, right? Because one was given a higher social status, the other one was put down, and that lack of being able to get the goal, what they needed was to have food and have daily necessities, caused aggression, and then just, the social inequalities, and it just kind of until it exploded. Okay. Dissimilarity and social distance. So you actually, there's two groups, right? You have your in group, it's the group you're in, and the out group, it's the group you're not in, right? So your in group is either the junior or senior class, and the out group is either the junior or senior class, depending on what year you're in, right? And surprise, you tend to feel biased towards your own group. So when you were a junior, juniors were the best. But now that you're a senior, seniors rule, right? So you like whatever group you're in, okay? And that's kind of common sense, because why would you want to be in a group that you don't like, okay? And what's funny is that the most intense dislike often come between out groups that are very similar. That's like Cubs and Sox, right? They're similar. They come from a very similar place, so they have a lot of in-group bias. Same thing, junior-senior wars, right? They come from a similar place. That's how rivalries get started. Okay, scapegoating. This is when you provide an outlet for anger by blaming someone else. Sorry, my throat. By blaming someone else for your problems, right? This is what happened with the Jewish population in Germany, right? They were scapegoated for Germany's problems, and they were made to, everyone was made to believe that they were the reason that Germany was falling apart and everyone was poor and didn't have food to eat and all those things. Okay, it's when you put the blame on someone else. Categorization. So it's actually very natural for us to create categories when we're trying to understand the world. It makes the world easier, right? So whenever the problem with categories is that we often assume that the people who are outside of our group have this thing called homogeneity. So it's the idea that groups that are out there are very similar to each other. It's kind of like if an Asian person thought that a lot of black people were similar to each other, or if a white person thought that a lot of Mexican people were similar. The group that's like your out group, you actually assume that they are very similar, which is actually not true. You are actually more similar than they are amongst each other in the group. Okay, and there's this thing that happens naturally between 3 and 9 months. It's called the other race effect, and this is where the idea of they all look the same comes from. You actually have a harder time identifying facial features of races that are different than yours, people who don't look the same as you, and you're more likely to say very blanket statements about them. And then, but of course, the more exposure you have to different races and ethnicities, that can decrease and go away. That's often why someone is like a white person might describe another white person's features, and then when they describe someone as, they might say an African American, but they never say white. Same thing, African Americans. They might say, oh, like this white, blah, 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 whereas opposed to in African Americans, they would just describe all the features. Vivid cases, right? So vivid cases are like 9/11. You make judgments of the most available memories. So this is the availability heuristic, right? It's the idea that a lot of times that vivid case comes to mind, and if we had some really bad experience with one race or one ethnicity or one religion or one whatever, you remember it and you can't let it go, right? And you judge them for the rest of their life based on that. Okay, so how do we get rid of the idea that, so this is, the next thing is the just world hypothesis. So the just world hypothesis is that people in the world get what they deserve. It's kind of like hindsight bias, where once it happens, you're like, oh, they deserved it, right? And in a survey, people had more sympathy for cancer patients than AIDS patients. And that's because they think, oh, AIDS patients, like, they deserved it. They did something to get AIDS, right? And it's the same thing with homelessness, right? Oh, like, no wonder he's homeless. Look how lazy he is. And the reason people do this is because if bad things can happen to good people, then what might happen to you? So instead of dealing with that scariness, right, what you do is you say bad things happen to bad people. And so if something bad happened to you, it must be because you deserved it, because the world is just and fair and good things don't happen, or bad things don't happen to good people. All right, what are the factors of love and attraction, right? Last thing. So the first thing is proximity. When you're near someone, you like them, right? And this is the mere exposure effect. Repeated exposure breeds liking. The more you see something, the more you like it, okay? This is the 4 faces experiment they did, where they showed 4 faces at the beginning of the term and at the end of the term in college. And because those 4 faces were actually real people in the class, the people rated them as more attractive at the end. And then your book, I think, talks about this example of the Taiwanese man who wrote his love, like the love of his life, letters every day, and she actually fell in love with the mailman because she saw the mailman every day, right? So mere exposure effect. The more you see it, the more you like it. Similarity. Paula Abdul was wrong. Opposites do not attract. Opposites attract, and you know that's wrong, okay? Birds of a feather flock together. That is true, all right? So the idea here is that we are actually married couples in general are more similar in age, race, religion, social class, education, intelligence, values, and physical attractiveness, right? Then they're dissimilar. And this can mean, a couple of different things. So generally you tend to you want to be with someone who likes the things that you like. And then also when you're with someone, you're attracted to them, you can kind of want to be like them. And so that can cause even more similarity. Okay, reciprocal liking. You're more likely to like someone who's nice to you. Imagine that, right? And also when we like others, we tend to see okay, so if you like someone, you tend to interpret their behavior maybe as liking you more than it actually is. So if you have a crush on someone and they give you a hug, you're like, ooh, he really likes me or she really likes me, but they might just be being friendly. So you tend to read into things too much. But you do like people who like you. Okay, you don't get into relationships where the cost is greater than the benefits. Physical arousal, all right? So this is Shakta, two-factor Shakta. This is the idea that you can sometimes misattribute something physiologically arousing for sexual tension or sexual arousal. And this is why oftentimes, in the movies, they'll have some intense fighting scene, and then they're at the end they want to make out or something, right? So you get a false emotion. Okay, and the number one most important thing is physical attractiveness. And I know you say, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but it's not, right? College welcome week, the only thing that mattered at the end of the night was physical attraction. Even if you were not compatible with that person at all, at the end of that night, it was physical attraction. Physical attraction predicts dating frequency, okay? And people are perceived as attractive are healthier, happier, more honest, and successful. So if you're cute, you're seen as healthier, happier, and more honest than less attractive counterparts. And that's actually called, as you see there, the halo effect, right? And there's something very interesting when it comes to relationships. It's called the matching hypothesis. It's the idea that males and females of equal attractiveness pick partners that are equally attractive. So if you're a 10 on the hottie scale, you're going to pick another 9 or 10. You're not going to pick a 5 unless the 5 has got something really awesome to bring to the table, like some cash money, right? And we don't want, we don't talk about that, but that's true. And then a 4 or 5 is going to be with a 4 or 5 or 6, right? So that's the way that works, okay? What makes someone attractive? Well, there's a lot of qualities that vary by culture, but some are consistent. So the ones that are consistent come from the evolutionary standpoint. Youth in women and maturity in men. George Clooney is sexy over here, and Julia Roberts is more sexy over here, right? Gray hair, not so cute. Young guy, not so cute, right? And ultimately, we think things are different, but a lot of times, things can be very much the same in terms of what's attractive. Okay, passionate love is the Shakta two-factor stuff. It's intense, positive absorption of another, right? Compassionate love is deep, affectionate attachment we feel for those whom we're going to spend our lives with, right? You feel intertwined. Okay? Compassionate love works, right, when there's equity, okay? Equity means that people share, right? And, and the relationship is equal. A compassionate love also works when there's self-disclosure. So you need to be able to share details about yourself with someone, and they share them back with you, and then you learn about each other. Okay? That's all for now, AP Psychos, and remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.